Hey, good morning, guys. But it's a different stream. So, if you come through this top line in terms of the community on TradingView, you'll see um, this image, right? So I don't know why it's done what it's done. Obviously, it was an editor's pick. So that was yesterday's stream, right? Now that was really a follow-on from yeah, this one here, right? That was really a follow-on from the one the day before, right? So what happened the day before was basically had several people say to me that it cut off on TradingView after 18 minutes, right? So if you want to follow that, go see this one first, and then kind of come into this one, which was the kind of the finish off of the bits that I missed on the first one. Right? So the next thing I want to do, right, is I want to share kind of the forex market, predominantly DXY, with a bit of rationale as to what it's doing for the overall market. Again, the reason that I wanted to do the stream yesterday was it kind of cut off the day before. The reason I'm doing today is I have a really, really big thank you for all you guys in terms of following, supporting, etc., etc. If obviously you don't know, I had a book published back in May this year, and yesterday it actually just kind of went pretty much insane, right? So from yesterday, I ended up above people like Tony Robbins, um, also people like the Wolf of Wall Street, which was absolutely mad in the grand scheme of things. So really, really appreciate kind of everything there, guys. And so much so that if you come across to our Discord server, I'm going to give this as indicator, this kind of combined oscillator away. Just message me, obviously, in the visitor section, and I'll sort that out, right? So anyway, back to obviously the charts and to what I'm seeing, where we go in, what I think kind of next. This particular post, right? This DXY move. This goes back a couple of weeks, right? I was talking about this on this first large green candle as to why I was expecting this move. Right now, obviously at this point, it was kind of more than interesting. I think the only trouble we had was this kind of spike grabbing the liquidity above, and then we've kind of carried on and completed, right? So nothing's really changed, right? Surprise, surprise, in terms of what I was thinking, why I see this type of move. The only thing we've now done, right, is we've got ourselves in this position where we've got DXY practically oversold, right? So DXY oversold is almost kind of contrarian to a lot of other instruments, tools, etc., etc. So what you'd anticipate is strength in the dollar would weaken things like Bitcoin, for example, gold, SPX, right? So anything that you see in essence with this USD kind of afterwards on my chart over here, right? If we're expecting strength dollar, we would usually, right? So it's not a guaranteed and it's not all the time, right? These things do diverge and they also kind of collide and come back together from time to time, right? So in terms of what we see and what I'm seeing, the move that I anticipated back here, right, has kind of played itself out. Although we had this kind of run on liquidity kind of halfway through the move, right? We've kind of completed a level back down to an area of kind of interest, right? We've now got to this point where we are already oversold, right? I'm going to check this out on a bigger time frame. So right now, bigger time frame, right? We haven't quite finished this move to the downside. We've got a false bar to the upside, right? So the move back up is kind of due, right? But it's not due just yet, right? Now, this is one thing I think is kind of, it tickles me with especially the crypto market and Bitcoin. When people think, oh well, we've gone from 25K to 35K, we must be on the move, not realizing the market can easily come back into that range 29, 27, 25, 20, right? This isn't a kind of a time thing, right? This doesn't mean that because it's done, it's done, right? It's gone, it's done. Ultimately, what you need is to look at the liquidity, the levels of liquidity, and the size of the move that you're anticipating, right? This is the biggest thing for me, going back, like I said, to Bitcoin, in terms of with any kind of accumulation, if it doesn't have the time to accumulate, how far do you really think it can go, right? And that's the beauty of it. When I'm looking at this particular move on the DXY, right, this will affect, like I said, all the Forex market. This will affect, your gold, your oils, SPX, Bitcoin, etc., right? So what I'm seeing right now, if I come back down to the daily, right, is I want to see a kind of a bottoming pattern, right? This is kind of a smaller scale accumulation, right, sideways, right? So although this move could easily spike up and we could rally straight above, right, I really want to see some more time in this lower range, right, in this kind of bottom part underneath this, ideally, right, underneath these two spikes here. And the reason for that is that would give us the next clear level, right, of the accumulation. So as the weekly, right, keep in mind what the stochastic's saying, as the weekly comes down, right, and we've got that false bar to the upside, right, when the weekly is ready to go, I want to see that daily have gone kind of up, come back down, right, maybe gone back up again and come back down, and then go, right, because that'll give us the kind of momentum to see us through, right. So that's the kind of move that I'm looking for DXY wise, right? Now, with that being said, if I come through some of these other instruments that I've talked about, right? This one's a bit messy, and I've done this live on a stream, right? We've had what I see as that kind of buyer's climax followed by a UT, right? I was looking for the UTAD before we have this move down, right? So we've come down. I don't even know where I drew this, right? We've gone up, we've come down, we've gone up. Now, at this particular point, all we've done, right, is we haven't gone down as deep as this. If you draw a line there, right, you'd kind of want this ideally to do something like that, right? So we didn't quite go as deep here, right? So maybe we won't get as high as a UTAD in terms of the expectations, right? But the general idea is we got a false bar on a daily to the upside, right? Which means we're very likely to grind on up, right? But the grind on up means that the momentum's there, but it's kind of depleting, right? It can take us and see us through past these highs, right? Past this, right? But the reality is it's already finished. It's already kind of entering the train station, if you will, right? It's the slow down momentum before we anticipate the drop, right? So again, zoom out on the weekly, right? We've got this false bar, massive false bar on the weekly, right? It's been going on since April, right? So this grind up basically for me means that we're now starting this distribution. The distribution's kind of there or thereabouts, right? So smaller time frame daily, anticipate that move, that little grind up, creating that UTAD, come on down, right? Let's look on the monthly where we are. Yeah, in terms of the monthly, similar thing, right? So for me, distribution, it's due. I think in terms of, I can see obviously a number 5 there. We've probably got 1, 2, 3, 4. If I'm honest, I think that this box I drew back in January. If you come back through my streams and you go through the Forex streams in January on TradingView, you'll actually see this was actually January's call. So we've had the 4. We've come up for the 5. I genuinely think that 5, whether it's completed and this is the high, whether we come in and have a schematic 1 with ultimately the UTAD, I kind of feel that, that's what we're kind of on the cards right now, right? So with that being said, right, this is the first, I'm going through these pairs, right? I used to trade GBP, JPY an awful lot, right? This is kind of the first couple of prop firms that I did. I actually used only GBP, JPY. The second thing, obviously, this is the one that I'm trading predominantly at the moment, right? This is kind of my pair. This is the one that I'm really enjoying. This is the easiest one for me to read. This is the one that, I focus probably 99% of my time on in terms of actually trading. So for me on this particular move, right, there's a couple of things that have happened. We've clearly had the last couple of days this kind of change of character above, these old highs, right? So this is the first kind of lower lows, lower highs coming down. We all of a sudden make this lower low, followed by that kind of first break above this level, right? So for me, again, kind of similar to the GBP, JPY. Again, you have to think in terms of where we want to see DXY, right? I've just said DXY to move on up, right? So if DXY is moving on up, what would you expect, something against DXY to do? Well, come down. So we've got this move here, right? This obviously is showing the same thing. So again, I said obviously if you want to come across to the visitor section in Discord, click on the link in my signature. I'll put this live today, but after this stream, and you guys can take this one for free. So in essence, right, what this has done, I've combined three oscillators, right? And the general idea, the stochastic, the RSI, I can't remember what the last one was. I used ChatGPT for this. And the general idea was to kind of combine them with a view of not only just putting them together, which sounds obvious, but to actually put them together with an average score rather than an overall score, right? So the general idea is that when you have this dark red kind of background, that the trend is kind of trending downwards, right? The green background is we trending kind of upwards. So although prices moved here, which is potentially an early indicator, right? The reality is it's not done until we cross into green or into red, from here, right? So what I'm seeing at the moment, kind of in any way, shape, or form, DXY, I'm anticipating a move up, which means I'm looking for a move down, smaller time frames, obviously on things like Aussie dollar, right? So if we assume we've seen a change of character for one, right? The next thing is we've got a low. Right? I've shown where I think we are big picture in terms of the move going back, probably even further back than this. Actually, this is on daily time frame. There you go. So what I've kind of seen, right, is if we class this as our zero, we had a one up high, right? We got this potentially as a two, which means inside this 1 2 we've got a nested one followed by a very long two, right? Now this is the ideal scenario for me because DXY, although we've got momentum to the upside, kind of do the upside. I feel going back a year, maybe 18 months now. So we kind of capped, right? I think 115 to 120, you might overshoot to 121, 122 at a push on DXY. And therefore, I kind of feel as this move now starts to rally, we'll get the kind of divergence from these other instruments because the kind of the pull or the magnetic kind of pull from really COVID kind of time, right? So from this kind of spike, a lot of instruments, a lot of currency pairs, they kind of hit the low or hit the high extreme at that kind of COVID spike, right? So COVID has really brought a lot of things together. And I think we're now seeing the divergence kind of starting to happen more and more, which is, 3 years on plus down the line. So you'd expect that from a much bigger cycle, much bigger move, right? So grand scheme of things, I think we get a move like this, right? But the DXY strength would mean that we need to come back down again, right? So even if we assume this was a one, we're going to get a nested one inside the nested one of the 1 2 larger move, right? Then I think we can start to rally. That three will be on the first A of the weakness of DXY later down the line, right? So I think for me, that's kind of where we are in terms of, Aussie dollar. You can treat New Zealand dollar, Kiwi pretty much the same, right? I've already got that drawn there too. Euro JPY, right? Again, this goes back, I think this particular stream was back in August, and I've talked about, why we got a false bar daily at the moment, right? So expect a grind up, then I think we get the move back down. Then I think another move back up. I don't think this one is far enough along. I think this is still its extension to the 3 or the 5. So I think that we've got a bigger move to come, right? But it needs obviously a little bit of relief before we kind of carry on through, right? So if I zoom out again, let's have a look at this on a weekly. On a weekly, we got a false bar, right? So I love the idea of, a grind on up. Monthly, I'd love to say, before I click it, I'd love to say that it's still traveling kind of upwards. Yeah, so we still got, upwards. We got a false bar. So in that sense, I really, really would like to see Euro JPY kind of grind on up, aim towards these older highs here. 169 ish, right? I'd love to see, 169 there before we we really come on down, right? USD Japanese yen, well, again, pretty obvious. USD kind of now the front runner, so you're expecting a move up on a move up rather than a move on down, right? So I think we've come down 3-4. I think we've got a monthly move now, and therefore I think to complete the larger three, I think we need to grind on up a little bit more, right? So I'm going to zoom down now from a monthly down to a weekly, right? Now, what you can see with the weekly is that technically the move down has already started, right? Now, one thing we've got is on this combined indicator, we've got a little green signal there. We've got a false spark here, right? And the line, I've used this as the high, right? So 151.94. We haven't quite touched it. We're 151.72, right? So I'd love to see another little dart back up, right? Just above this, peeking its head above, creating that UTAD before we get our proper move down, right? That completes for me the three, right? This obviously needs to be dragged back to this level. And then I think once we've completed that three, we can come down for up 5, grand scheme of things, right? That 5 will be the move that I'm anticipating the completion of DXY's 5, right? So 4 to 5 bigger scale should also be 4 to 5. This is what I've read this to be at the moment, right? Daily time frame, I'm hoping obviously we get a little bit more of a move back up, and then that move up to come back down. So let me get rid of this. We're not quite there, right? Let me just look at this in a bit of detail. In terms of coming in, this could easily cross, and I think we could go back up, right? It's not confirmed yet, so I wouldn't jump into that with the hope that it does. But I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that turn and kind of come back up, spike above this little orange line, and kind of complete. And guys, this is why I keep saying, things for me, nothing's changed. Some of these draw-ins, some of these analysis, and again, you can come back through my own streams. The very little Forex streams I've done in the last year, right, or since January, I've covered this, right? I think there was, one in January, one in March, maybe one in June or July, another one in August, and then ultimately October. So, you're only talking 5-6 streams on the Forex markets, right, in general. And the reason that I don't really need to do much on that is that, what I've said is kind of doing, and what I'm anticipating it's done. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm looking for my levels, and once I'm comfortable, I'll take my next trades, and my kind of trades these days are trades that last me, a year, so it's not so much I'm a longer term investor. I'm looking for these long term trends that I can take multiple trades in the same direction, scaling in, and scaling in. And that's how I tend to operate these days. All right. So, Euro USD, I don't think I have much on this. I haven't traded this one really for an awful long time. I mean, a little bit like the kind of crypto markets, right? The trouble I find with Euro USD is a lot of the brokers and the exchanges and so on, a lot of these guys tend to manipulate this. You will often find Euro USD is the smaller spread. It's the kind of pool that the newbies tend to trade, kind of often. It is obviously relatively stable, but it can have a little bit of volatility from time to time. It doesn't seem to respect the same as some of the other established pairs, like obviously Aussie dollar for me. So in the grand scheme of things, I kind of think you could probably just take this on the back of, DXY. Euro does actually control DXY per se. So I think in the grand scheme of things, if we zoom out a little bit, I think, we've had this, we've had this kind of move down overall, right, for the last couple of months. I think on the monthly time frame, we are due, some kind of relief. I think that relief, like I said, is probably going to be very timely with that DXY move overall, right? So the next move for DXY kind of up, right, will obviously keep this kind of coming down. So I think on the weekly time frame, I'd love to see this almost the inverse there. Yeah. And the inverse basically means that, I'd love to see this kind of travel on up, get us into that oversold situation. And then as DXY does its little dance kind of up, this does its dance down. dance down then gets us into the accumulation range on a monthly time frame on on euro. And then I think obviously we can look at buys, once that kind of accumulation phase is gone. And when I'm talking about monthly buys in terms of accumulation, it is something you probably could then take in one direction for a year to 3 years, depending on what happens during that time. GBP USD, similar thing, guys. Look, this is already kind of mapped out, marked out. We've literally moved on up. I think this is the inverse. So I'm expecting a 5 move down. So this is a 3, 4, 5, and 5 being obviously down. So what I'd like to see with this particular move is, this is what I'd class as almost the redistribution in this zone, right? So the redistribution there, dropping down obviously as we grind kind of sideways, dropping down for that redistribution, bigger time frame. I'd love to see up high coming down overall. So we haven't quite finished yet, and I think for me the weekly is going to be the factor here, right? So as USD, which is DXY, moves up, I think we get the move down, right? The move down puts us in a similar position to what I've just covered with euro. We have a sideways kind of action, the accumulation cycle. I'd love to see that happening in and around this region before ultimately we carry on up, right? It could be a little bit lower, right? Obviously, if it is a 4-5, then you could take out these lows. But I think for me, this region would be great in terms of stopping action of some kind, right? So, I'm going to take these off so I know where I am. USD CAD. Yeah, similar thing, guys. I think we've reached kind of a climax in terms of USD Canadian dollar. I think we, on a monthly time frame, we can expect a distribution, right? That distribution obviously would mean weakness in DXY, which is obviously the bigger picture. After we hit that, I think 112 to 115 range. Weekly time frame, I think like everything, I think this is where for me the Forex markets are pretty obvious. We got a false spot to the upside, which means kind of expect a little bit of a grind up. We could probably play with these levels. We've probably seen a buyer's climax here, followed by an AR on a smaller time frame, which means UT, UTAD, potentially schematic one, and then we can come on back down. USD Swiss franc. Well, again, I'm not really a fan of this one. The ones I haven't marked up, I'm not really looking to these, right? So, in terms of anything kind of of interest for me, this just tends to go sideways. I think this is a pretty stable pair in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, nothing really. I think for me, it's going to be smaller time frame. We can expect some strength DXY, right? So smaller time frame, I think the strength. Longer time frame, I think we're obviously going to have that weakness. So strength, yeah, strength on the monthly. Look, we'll see strength to start with, followed by weakness. So I kind of think up to come back down and stay pretty much flat is the obvious play until we have an extreme move with something like DXY, or something like World War III kicks off and really gives people something to look at the chart slightly differently. Euro GBP, again, I don't really trade this one. The reason that I've got this one really on my chart is that I'm obviously living in France, and my kind of work, my brokers and everything else, they're all connected back to the UK. So I tend to earn money in pounds and kind of transfer them into euros kind of as and when needed. In the grand scheme of things, I think pretty much the same as Swiss franc. I think we kind of pretty much flat. I've seen this since the Brexit move, 2016, that, we were around, I think it was about 69 pence per euro back in 2016. I remember Brexit hitting and, everything from, petrol, diesel, so on for the cars. It just kind of skyrocketed. And I think from there, I think 94, being this kind of extreme, and we've kind of played between that kind of 86 and 95 region almost ever since, and I think this is where, let me find where the Brexit, I think it was June, yeah, June, July 16. So I think for me, look, as you can see, we've kind of gone sideways and done very little else. We've had a couple of spikes up, we've had a couple of spikes down. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's an exciting pair, so I don't really look at it. Shorter time frame, I think, up obviously monthly, which is the strength. So I think on the weekly time frame, we want to be looking at the down to go up. Yeah, so it's pretty much the inverse to the Swiss franc, where it's kind of up to come down. I think this is down to come up, and there we are. Let's have a little look at gold. Gold on a monthly range is actually sitting smack bang in the middle. Right now, one of the things we discussed in the visitors chat, I can't think of where it was. One of the things we discussed, I can't find it, was ultimately how gold is used, by the bigger players to kind of exit and to buy up cheap stocks when the cross market, kind of crashes and so on. Now, I've talked about this, right? And this goes back, I think there was a post I done called the Hool Market, right? So if you come into my posts, my last couple of posts in the last couple of months, up, down, trading view, I think it was around here somewhere. I remember it being, I won't be able to find it now. Yeah, the Hool Economy. So again, I kind of talked about a couple of things, right? I talked about SPX, right, with this kind of move. I'd love to see this move up, right? This goes back to April. I'd love to see the move up, and then a kind of a crash down through this trend, right? So I think this is still kind of pretty much, in play. DXY, that 100.70 level, right? I think we breached just below it, and kind of now we've rallied from it, but nice level there in terms of bigger picture. And I think, for me, the 4 was that drop, and then we are on the way to the 5, right? So I think for me, this is why 115 is kind of key. We could rally up 120, 120 something if you take a little zoom in on that. Back to gold, right? So what I was saying in terms of gold is, back in April, I was talking about the triple top, right? This triple top move, which I think we've ultimately now kind of had and seen, right? So if I zoom out on gold, which I've already done, ultimately 1, 2, 3, right? We then had obviously the rejection, the move down from that 3. So I think for me, on this, kind of smaller time frame, looking at the weekly, I think we've got a little bit of room to come down right now. Again, this kind of makes a lot of sense based on the DXY move going up, right? So I'd love to see kind of gold come back down on this weekly time frame. We kind of sat right in the middle on the monthly, which means if the weekly kind of drags the monthly down, then ideally we should get to a point of being oversold on gold in the next couple of months, right? So a low position for me on gold would suggest, in theory, a slightly bigger move up on SPX in general, right? So looking at this weekly time frame, we've got stochastic down under 50%, right? We've got this kind of move back, from that trend line I said we'd break. I think what we're going to do now is probably test this trend line a couple of times, which means probably sideways. And then I think on a bigger time frame, like on a monthly, on a bigger time frame, right, we've still got 2 things. We got this move down, right, which I'd love to see, another little drop on this before we make another high, right, or come back up into this range. But we have got that false bar, right? So I think for me, the reality is of this one, I think we play sideways slightly. We play sideways to drop down as gold inverts, and DXY then ultimately being the strength. DXY strength equals the weakness in this then overall. And then I think for me, this becomes another potential high, right? Or even back up to kind of old highs. And what I'd love to see is, as we take out liquidity and potentially target this range of liquidity, then we can have a potential for a decent type of crash, right? It's probably going to be, next year now rather than this year. I think this is the kind of, recession slash, crash that people are kind of looking for. But I genuinely think we make potentially another one high, or at least run on the highs, before we have some kind of crash. So I think that's where I think we are, kind of right now, bigger picture. Let's see what else is there. I'll just cover quite quick in terms of oil. I think strength, obviously, dollar would potentially lead to weakness on this. And I think, we got a false bar daily to the downside, which, adds kind of confirmation to some weakness. I think on the weekly, we've already kind of aiming down. So I think for me, we'll have some weakness slash sideways before we get another bout of accumulation on the WTI. Brent, pretty similar. We've had a move down, we've had a move back, we've come down. So what I'd like to see down here is kind of sideways and down, right? The grind down, accumulation and up, right? So pretty similar grand scheme of things there. So I'm going to finish like that. I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions, right? And obviously, before I finish, thanks again yesterday, guys, in terms of the book. It was really cool seeing, this above The Wolf of Wall Street and obviously Tony Robbins. In the grand scheme of things, as a thank you, I want to bring you guys obviously over to Discord, and I'll sort out this indicator. And like I said, I'm going to finish as we are. So no questions, no thoughts, brilliant, and I'll see you on the next stream. So again, thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.